Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
Oh, I've got a bit of heartburn. I could use a stummy.
Stimmy. Did they even tell you what a stummy is? Like I almost
it's heartburn medication.
Is it heartburn medication?
They built in a giant
it's like Tums.
corporation out of Tums. Yeah.
I don't know how that works. Like how does that work? How do you build an entire pharmaceutical corporation out of a Tums? I mean, don't get me wrong, Tums are helpful, but like they're kind of on the border between drug and candy.
Yeah.
Kind of like brain candy.
Oh.
You see what I did there? I didn't plan that fucking shit at all. Welcome all, everybody. This week we are going to be talking about the 1996 film Brain Candy from The Kids in the Hall. I'll tell you this right now, and actually, before I get to that, I want to get some housekeeping out of the way. Okay.
Yes.
As this episode comes out, I think I gave myself till the end of the week, so that's this Friday, because this episode is going to come out tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday, and by Friday, I'm planning on pulling the podcast off of Twitter. So if you haven't done so already, I mentioned this before, right, John? I mentioned this last week. We have a newsletter now that's going to be going out, and this is so important, I'm going to go to Solo Shot to Me. Solo Shot to Me. This is so important. We're going to be going off of Twitter. So if you are following us on Twitter, if that's where you are, well, thanks for doing that. I appreciate you. But we're going to be pulling our podcast off of Twitter. We do have multiple avenues on social that you could be on. I might even put us on Blue Sky. I don't know yet. But I am rolling out our new newsletter. New newsletter. See how that is? That is going to be a recap of this podcast every week and also include a bonus episode. This week is the first week of that bonus episode. I don't know what it's going to be on. Why? Because it's raw, uncut, and just shooting from the hip. Right, John? You don't know what we're going to talk about, right?
Meh. No.
That's right. Meh. It could be anything.
We're going to do some freeform jazz, you know?
Just it could be freeform jazz with our mouths or our assholes. You never know. Yeah. But that's the thing. It's raw. It's real. It's uncut. We're calling it uncut reels. Get it? That's going to be the first exclusive to our newsletter. So if you haven't done so already, it's in the show notes of this episode. Sign up to get that newsletter. Okay. It's really important. That's how I'm trying to kind of keep connection with our community and kind of, build that community with you all rather than using something like Twitter. Cause it's kind of a cesspool. But now that I've got that little housekeeping out of the way, do I have anything else? Is there anything else going on, John?
Nothing, I don't think in particular towards like housekeeping, but I do want to mention that this is yet another edition. It's been a while of our really that awful ?
I'm glad you brought that up. We haven't done one of these in a while where it's got the reputation of being fucking terrible, but is it really terrible or is it just misunderstood? I have a feeling right off the bat, John, that The Kids in the Hall Brain Candy is more misunderstood than terrible. Your thoughts?
I certainly feel so, but I also grew up with the show, loving the show, loving all of the performers on the show, all the sketches. I mean, some like Python and SNL, some miss, sometimes violently, but they're fewer and farther in between than the gems. So I was just so excited that there was a movie to watch, but I understand that this type of humor, which is a combination of like edgy's 90 grunge stuff meets Monty Python, is not going to be for everybody. Like it's same thing with like Strangers with Candy. That was a show that they made a movie out of. I'm like, this is going to alienate a lot of audiences, So I'm not surprised that if somebody just bought a ticket to it because maybe they thought the trailer looked humorous, they're going to go, what the hell is this? Because they've never seen the show.
Well, I mean, that's a good starting point there. And this is something that I think younger audiences might need a little refresher on. Can you explain, John, what The Kids in the Hall are?
Yes. So initially they started out as two separate comedy troupes. You had Dave Foley and Kevin. I can't remember how to say his last name. They
McDonald.
were Kevin McDonald. Yeah. Sorry. I thought I'm thinking of the other one whose M name is hard to say. They started out as the Kids in the Hall, and Bruce McCullough and not Scott Thompson,
Mark McKinney.
Mark McKinney.
Yeah.
They were with two other guys who ended up being writers on the Kids in the Hall and stopped performing, like the performance end of it. The four of them met and agreed to kind of like form a union, and then around like the mid to early 90s, they met Scott Thompson, who was doing his own thing, and they brought him into the fold. That's where our initial, 5 came from for the show. And they were touring, doing just, comedy clubs and all kinds of stuff. And Lauren Michaels caught them. And, and
I love how like you made him. I mean, I'm assuming it was done on purpose, that, the greedy corporate overlord is basically Lauren Michaels.
Yeah.
It sounds just like him.
1,000 times better Lauren Michaels than Mike Myers, Dr. Evil. But yeah, Lauren Michaels found them. I think they initially tried to like get a few of them for SNL, but it wasn't a right fit. And then he did like, what that Simon Cowell did with, and he found like 5 Asian young boys and put them into a boy band together. Thought, well, why don't I just create a whole new show? It'll air on, CBC in Canada and HBO in America, and it'll be different than Saturday Night Live. A little more strange, a little more out there. More of a hint of Monty Python. And the show ended up running for 5 years. Well, it was successful, not huge. It was never a Saturday Night Live or never a Monty Python, but it had its fan base. It lasted 5 seasons. So a very kind of like, again, bizarre grunge meets absurd, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the Kids in the Hall always felt to me, because I never watched it during its original run. I watched it when it was playing on like reruns on Comedy Central. That's how I was introduced to it. But it always felt to me like the more, I don't want to say necessarily more sophisticated, but just like if you're looking for raw, actual comedy from people that maybe you can relate to, like that's the thing too, is like, don't get me wrong, SNL was great during the time period that Kids in the Hall was happening. Like that's where you get a lot of your hardcore, characters in the 90s there. But they always seemed like they were one step away from superstardom. At least for me, I always felt that way. But Kids in the Hall always was like, no, these are like real working comedians. Like you would see these people in a bar if you looked hard enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I to use a Saturday Night Live comparison, like Norm Macdonald, they always said he was the comedian's comedian because his Weekend Update was hit and miss. I thought everything he did on Weekend Update was fucking hysterical, but it wasn't for, I'd say, the general Saturday Night Live type audience. But what was so great about Norm was he didn't care. He just was going to do whatever he wanted to anyways. And they let him do it for like 5 or 6 seasons, and this is like kind of, okay, we're going to put this one on HBO because these guys are going to be not everyone's cup of tea. These aren't Saturday Night Live. This is something a little different. So if you want an alternative, you can watch Kids in the Hall or Mr. Show on HBO.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because I always thought that the Kids in the Hall kind of paved the way for Mr. Show.
I think that's fair. Yeah. And when I said a second ago, when they met Scott Thompson in the early 90s, no, actually, I'm sorry, that it was the late 80s that they recruited Scott, because that's really when this started. Yeah. Like Brian, I only watched the re-airings of this because I think they formed the HBO show when I was like 3 years old. So I wasn't quite watching then. I had to be a little older to appreciate it. No,
we weren't watching then. But Brain Candy is a weird movie. Okay. And I think it's kind of interesting because this is the first time that I'd ever seen it. So John had told me, hey, we're going to do Brain Candy. And I'm like, what is that? As often happens. Right, yep. John, you kind of throw me a curveball every once in a while. You're like, hey, yeah, remember this weird movie that you've never seen and, kind of was buried at the video store? Yeah, that's the movie we're going to review next week. Good luck finding it.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So John told me about this. And I'm like, okay, where the fuck am I going to find this movie? And sure enough, you look down the right back alleys of the internet, and you find it, meaning like Amazon Prime. But I watched this, and you know what the thing is though? Even though this is a Kids in the Hall movie, it doesn't feel like a Kids in the Hall sketch show. And that's kind of, I think, one of the first things that I want to bring up is that this movie is a bit different from the series. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, but it does hit some of like the tropes. Like I think what they kind of said is like, what can be the overall premise that there can be subsets of characters in here. Like, okay, so we're gonna use this magic drug that makes you happy when you take it, like more of a happiness than you ever thought possible. It's like Prozac and ecstasy and Blue Chew in one pill. So
Gleamanex.
yeah. And so it's like, okay, well, then we can have like scientists doing tests. We can have a boardroom of shady executives. We can have a bunch of people that need to take the medication. So we can kind of get little snippets of individuals. So, yeah, unlike the show, which is just very similar to Python, where it's a guy going, I'm crushing your head, to Chicken Lady, to a guy saying he's never going to let the monkeys out. Like every sketch is just one jump to the next. It has no correlation. It's almost like, to me, they're doing a little bit of the sketch comedy show, but everything is interwoven together around the brain candy.
Yeah, that was the thing, was for me, if you were looking, and I could see where people might find this movie kind of problematic, is like they were used to Kids in the Hall just being a series of sketches that had no connective tissue. And this honestly feels like, kind of like what you're saying, John, like the connective tissue's there and it's more prominent than you would see in any Kids in the Hall episode. But you still kind of have those different characters. Like the Serbian taxi guy is in this. And like, I know that was a character from the show itself that popped up a couple times. But I just felt like they were trying to play a bit more to like hey, we got to be grown-ups now and do a movie like grown-ups rather than playing to their strengths. One of the things I do love about this movie is that you in essence have 5 guys playing every character in the film.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. With the exception of like a couple. And those couple are like Brendan Fraser.
Yeah. Oh, and like there are small children in the movie who have like very, very tiny roles. Like instead of trying to dress up like little kids, they went, okay, we'll actually get little kids to play those parts, But
yeah, but it speaks to their craft to be able to create complete characters, even when they're dressed in drag, even when they're playing so many characters that are so diametrically opposed, and then you have the camera work that goes along with it to make it all blend together. I could only imagine that the production of this thing was an absolute fucking nightmare.
Yeah, on top of that, Dave Foley was on a 90s show. Like Brian and I are old, we'll know this show, News Radio. If you're a whippersnapper, it was a popular show. Had Phil Hartman on it.
It was very popular. A lot of people were watching that after they were watching Friends.
And Dave did not want to do this movie. He's like, guys, I landed a show. I don't want to do a movie. Like, guys, can't we move on? And like, Dave, if you don't do the movie, we're going to sue you. And he went, okay, I'm not writing any of it, but I'll be in it. So already you got that nightmare of one of the principal 5 being like not wanting to be there at all and under there for threat of litigation.
So kind of like a Bill Murray Groundhog Day situation.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because if you check the opening credits, like all the other 4 of the Kids in the Hall wrote the movie, but you don't see Dave's name because Dave had nothing to do with writing any of this.
And also, the other thing too is that I was looking online, and apparently I think Dave Foley and Kevin McDonald were going through divorces at the same time that they were filming this movie.
That's gotta be fun.
That's rough. That's the word I would use. Incredibly rough. And then on top of that, you're making this movie, which, you're talking about a ton of money. You've got Lauren Michaels involved. And you already kind of know it's going to be kind of out there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say like they looking at this movie, you can go and say like, oh yeah, it's not going to be successful. But I'm looking at this, it's 1996. what are the type of movies that are coming out that are comedies in 1996?
So we got Nutty Professor.
Nutty Professor, Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls.
Yeah.
A lot of very established kind of comedic movies. And this, I feel, doesn't fit within what was popular comedy at the time.
Yeah, it's alt rock as a comedy film.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I think they were just counting on the established fan base that they had, because I will say this about the Kids in the Hall. Like, this feels to me more like an episode of Kids in the Hall than any, except for, and now for something completely different, which is just a collection of their best sketches. That aside, than anything Monty Python did. Like, yeah, it's that Python humor, but it's very narrative focused, where this movie almost seems like a collection of sketches, but more organized.
See, I see the opposite side of it. I see it as more narrative focused than a collection of sketches. And I guess, you look at like what they've done, but I mean, they do have characters in there that are kind of standalone sketches of characters, right? Like, my favorite and the whole thing was the dad who is pretending he's not gay when he actually is gay.
And his family knows. they know.
Yeah. First scene with this guy, and this like sets the whole tone for the fucking movie. Okay. First scene with this guy, it's just a shot of two kids watching TV, and then the camera like pans up and we see the dad in his bedroom, half naked, rubbing his chest and watching gay porn. And you're like, you go down and you're like, oh, this is kind of strange and unusual. And the mom comes in, played by Kevin McDonald. And immediately it's like, where's your father, kids? Oh, he's upstairs watching gay porn and masturbating. And you're just like, you immediately think like, oh, the wife should have some reaction to this. No. It's is that all? Okay.
Yeah, business as usual. Yeah.
Business as usual. And then every scene that we get with that particular character over and over again, it just amps it up to 11. Like, we get flashbacks when he's on the brain candy of his happiest moment, which is being in the army. I can also see where in 1996 this might be off-putting to some audiences.
I think possibly more than anything, the reason they ended up on HBO, because like they're not too out there. It's not like, we're throwing F-bombs left around and there's titties and no, there's none of that really in there. I think it's possibly a lot of Scott's humor, because Scott is, for those that don't know, is an actual guess this homosexual man, and he puts
shock.
Yeah, but he puts a lot of that into his comedy, and I think that for some people they might be really just super uncomfortable about gay jokes that are from a gay perspective and not just like punching down of straight people writing about gay people.
Oh, you mean kind of like the whole, well, not Ellen was gay, but is gay, but like I know that at the time that she came out on her TV show, it made national news, because like, oh my God, Ellen's gay?
Protests at ABC.
Yeah.
Because because the people that were protesting didn't even know that Ellen, I mean, if you follow the trades, you do, but that Ellen herself was gay. They just thought the character of Ellen on her show was gay, and that was enough for them to riot at ABC.
Yeah, but I look at it as like, this is the time period. So you've got a movie by already an offbeat troupe of comedians, and they're doing, gay jokes. They're doing jokes about cancer. They're doing very much just the darkest of dark humor. And you put that out there on something like, a movie to the public. And this is before streaming. Okay. And it's no surprise to me it didn't do very well.
Yeah. And I think of a show like South Park, just going so dark, and I wonder if, obviously they reference Monty Python all the time. I wonder about if the Kids of the Hall had any influence on them at all. It could be some small, not at all. I don't know, but that whole dark approach of South Park, kind of mirrors this a lot.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that with South Park, they have the benefit of being an animated show. And then on top of that, their humor in the early days was not nearly as dark as it has become now. You know what I mean? Like it's funny if you watch some of the early episodes of South Park and you watch them now, you're just like, why was anyone up in arms over this show? Like, it's tame.
Oh, but Brian, there's a singing piece of Christmas poo, and Kenny drank gasoline. Oh no!
I mean, to be fair, the first episode is Cartman gets an anal probe.
He's farting fire. Well, what if the kids see?
Yeah, but I find it funny that Kids in the Hall kind of did. I don't think they necessarily got a fair shake with this movie when it came to reception because of the time period. I think if you put this movie out now, it would not be shocking at all. And I think it actually probably more successful because you have options like streaming where this sort of thing could do well, even if it's not in a four-wall theater.
I think also just the references to pharmaceuticals hit probably even harder today than they did in Bill Clinton's 1996.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So like the whole impetus for this movie is it's a critique of Prozac, because at the time that this movie came out in 1996, that was really the rise of the antidepressant, where now there's like bajillions of them and you have whole industries devoted to it. And you've got ads on, every commercial or streaming spot or whatever. There's an ad for some pill. Lauren and I make fun of one that has, Guy Rizzi. I think it's the funniest name. Have you ever seen that one?
Guy Rizzi. No, I know Riz is now a very popular term for having like fuck boy attitude.
Yeah, none of us got that, John.
Yeah.
None of us got the Riz. But no, there's one called Guy Rizzi, and it pops up every time we're watching any show on any streaming platform, and we break out laughing. We're just like, this is fucking who the hell names a pill Guy Rizzi? Probably does something really miraculous, but I just like no one thought of a good name for this. But yeah, the movie itself really kind of follows the trajectory of the development of a pill and turning the life of Dr. Chris Cooper upside down. Right?
And it makes a lot of sense that Kevin is the protagonist of this film, because you could say there's something slightly off-putting about the rest of them. Maybe Mark McKinney. Maybe Mark McKinney could have been, but I think they wanted him to do his Lorne Michaels impression more. So it's like Kevin has that baby face that it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to be the star of the movies.
Well, he just has kind of this wonderment and wide-eyed crazy scientist type vibe to him. Yeah. And I love his kind of turn from like in the first half of the movie, he's very much just kind of not wanting to accept being like in the limelight and not wanting to kind of, be at all like associated with the drug. He's just like, I'm just trying to make people happy because my backstory is that his dad failed to kill himself. That's
so
literally part of the movie.
Yeah. He's like, it's a flashback of him as a little kid. His dad comes home just absolutely beaten down by life. Yeah. It's like suit basically falling off. He's like, did you do well in school today, son? Sure did. Yeah. And just asking him if he's like been a good boy and like stroking his face in the strangest way possible. Like clearly a man who's been destroyed by life goes into the house and you just hear a gun go off. Yeah,
it's horrible, but it's also one of those very dark moments that you just kind of laugh because the gun goes off and you hear that he didn't do it right. So he's like, ow, I'll do it again.
Brian, on the sense of really that awful, like this reminds me in one very particular way of Death to Smoochie and Cable Guy, is that people get very turned off sometimes by very dark humor.
Yeah.
And this movie is riddled with like upsetting kind of jokes,
It's upsetting stuff, but here's the thing, it's every joke it almost has like a dark vibe, but there's also a little bit more of a sliver of don't take this so seriously.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like even that sequence, John, the fact that you have the dad, like you've got the shot where it's wide shot and we're seeing the house and the dad's going, "Oh, I didn't get it. Let me try it again." You can't take that seriously. And I think that is a very fine line that dark comedies have to try to walk. Is where do you go a little bit darker? Like there's scenes in The Cable Guy. You brought The Cable Guy, one of my favorite dark comedies, and like the scene where Jim Carrey is talking to Matthew Broderick and he's like basically stalking him and saying like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get you," and you've got the spider crawling up his face.
Yeah. If
you just removed the music from it and you put other type of music in it, it would feel much more menacing, right? But that's a movie that I think at points goes way too dark without that sliver of humor, you know? Whereas The Kids in the Hall, Brain Candy, you've got moments where you've got Cancer Boy and he's saying, "Don't squeeze my hand. I don't have enough marrow." And you're going like, yeah, this is really like grim because there are children dying of cancer.
Let's talk
but
about,
you just can't take it seriously.
Let's talk about Cancer Boy real quick. Because this, more than anything in this film, is where a lot of people checked out. And
are you for real? Like this was the thing that caused people to go like, yeah, no, I'm done.
There were a lot of people desperately asking Paramount to remove this from the film, or to not include it in the first place, because Cancer Boy only came around season 5 of Kids in the Hall, and they were like, do not let them put Cancer Boy in the movie. It's going to sink the movie. And executives were pushing to take Cancer Boy completely out of the movie. And I get it. It's like, Jesus Christ. Bruce McCullough actually he's very good at playing the character, but one has to ask, do we really need a dying like 9-year-old cancer kid as a character in the movie?
I mean, he's in it so many few moments in this movie that you could absolutely remove it, and I don't think it would do much to disrupt the movie. You know what I mean?
I guess like the idea is if you're making a pill for people to put all their cares away and to feel better, like who has a worse life than a little kid with cancer?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's also a thing where that fine line I talked about where do you go to the darker side of humor and then how do you bring it back? And then is there a sliver like that? It's a funny thing. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think for at least like I didn't find it as, oh my God, this is horrifying as the audiences back in 1996 did. I was like, okay, that's kind of, shocking, but I wasn't saying, oh my God, how dare this movie do this?
Yeah.
Maybe it's also because it's 2024 and I've seen way more shocking things on television and in film to be like, oh my God, a comedian dressed like a cancer patient. Yeah, that's horrifying. But I do think that for 1996, that may have been too much for them, but you got to know when to pull it back. You got to know when to add a sliver of humor. And that might've just been a little step too far.
Well, one thing that I do think is interesting, and I'm surprised that this film didn't do better in the 90s, is there is kind of an older trope that I stand by as compared to a younger generation's new look on things. My belief is that you have to make fun of everybody equally. Not don't be cruel, but everybody has some kind of thing that is funny about them. But if you exclude any group, you're othering them. But I'm very much an aging elderly millennial. So, the whole South Park idea is that, we'll make fun of blacks, whites, gays, straights, women, men, what have you. Because if we don't include anybody or leave anybody out, that is othering them and saying that they are not worthy of being a part of the game. While younger generations now say like, oh, you can't make jokes about trans people because they're treated so poorly in this country, or you shouldn't make, like this movie, you shouldn't make jokes about suicidal ideation, you shouldn't make jokes about children with cancer, like, because they're treated like second class citizens, or have something terrible going, so you should not punch down, you should only punch up like that. So it's completely two different ideologies, and I could see both perspectives, and I could argue for either side, for or against. Actually,
I think South Park has been able to manage to kind of toe this line of being, and especially being around for as long as it has. I mean, Jesus Christ, it came out in 1997. That was the first episode, and it's been on cable and streaming, and had a movie and everything for that long. I think they've been able to manage that relatively well, even in the face of some like intense controversies. But I also think that South Park's able to do that because they're animated. We don't take it as seriously because it's a cartoon, right? I think there is something to that. Going from one medium to another, there is leeway for criticism. But I mean, in terms of just this film, the Cancer Boy thing, not as shocking in 2024 eyes, but I can absolutely see where people might in 1996 find it in poor taste. And as I said, if you took it away, it doesn't exactly ruin the movie. The movie isn't about Cancer Boy. Cancer Boy is like one sketch out of 1,000 in this. If I was the Terp, I would have been like, you know what? We're trying to play the game here, so let's just cut it. But that would have been my response to it. So let's talk about the brain candy itself. Okay. So the brain candy, the whole impetus behind it is just that it is an antidepressant. It's not really tested.
It's the greatest antidepressant of all time. Yeah.
It is the greatest antidepressant of all time. And they try it out on this poor old woman who's played by Scott Thompson, Mrs. Herdeker. And I love how the way this pill works is that it's designed to find your happiest memory and lock you in on it chemically. It made sure to do that. And you basically kind of relive that memory over and over again. So Mrs. Herdeker, being the first patient to try this out, she locks in on a Christmas visit with her son, who just pops in for 5 minutes, grabs food, grabs beer, walks right out.
He takes a quick swig of whiskey. Yeah, the kids are just only there for the presents grandma got them. They're there for maybe 3 minutes and then go, all right, we'll see you next year, Mom. And that's her happiest memory. Because she comes like, too.
Yeah.
With food, like, oh, everybody laughed.
She's like, that was a good time. And it's like, out of your entire life, that's your happiest memory. But everyone has like these happy memories. And the way this whole thing starts is it's obviously it's just kind of a prescription drug and really just kind of put out there to just help people who are dealing with depression. But of course, we get a peer behind the lens of how does the pharmaceutical industry actually work? And are they really concerned with helping people? And the answer is no. They're concerned with money.
Profit. Yeah.
There's a scene where Mark McKinney plays Don Roritor, and he's the CEO and executive of Roritor Pharmaceuticals, and he's so excited that his pill was able to sell more than penicillin. So he screams it from the rooftops, "We beat penicillin!" Yeah. I mean, and then of course the media circus behind this pill and focusing all on Dr. Chris Cooper, who kind of gets wrapped up in this, and he kind of, abandons his ideals of trying to help people really for more or less the sex, drugs, and rock and roll type thing.
It's the same premise we saw in 2020 or 2021. 2021 at least. Don't Look Up with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's the same kind of premise where this person who's like trying to save the world and then just gets completely bogged down and banging Kate Blanchett and and doing drugs and drinking and partying.
Yeah. But the only problem, though, is that they didn't test this drug enough, and they find that it has one of the worst side effects ever. John, you want to talk about the worst side effects?
Well, see, I think this is interesting because I think that they were all just throwing ideas out, and they went, "Oh, that's funny. Write that on the marker board, or write that on a piece of paper and tack it to the, the board." And I think they got to a point where they went, "Well, something has to go wrong. We need a third act," and they didn't have one, so they went, "What if the pill puts you in a coma?" And you can kind of tell this movie, I will admit, I really like this movie, but it does fall apart violently in the third act.
Oh yeah, no, the third act is where it just kind of like falls, it goes off the rails. Because everything that had been built up, you can tell there was intentionality behind it. But as you said, John, like they got to a point where they're just like, well, Chris Cooper is a scumbag doctor now, and he's all about the image, and he doesn't really care too much about the pill. He's not talking to his scientist buddies. And what happens now? I don't know. Maybe like, everybody gets in a coma who took it. And that's what happens.
Yeah, he's totally forgotten about his love, Bruce McCullough, as the blonde doctor.
She almost let him kiss her.
Yeah. Tramp. Jeez.
I love the scenes that they have together where she's like, "I'm sorry about last night." What? Huh? What? And okay, whatever. And she just runs off. And then gets pissed off when he's got like an orgy of girls in his bed.
Yeah. Well, Brian, you had mentioned it earlier, but I just do want to reiterate, like the makeup crew for this movie, the fact that this is almost like a Robert Altman movie. There's so many characters, but they're all played by 5 people, and for them to all have different looking characters, even though it's just the same 5 people 10 times. Like there's probably 50 characters in this movie, and it's just 5 people playing 10 versions of these characters, but they all look unique. It is baffling how they pulled this off with these.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing. If anything else, the production of Brain Candy must have been insane. Like it must have been insane trying to wrangle, okay, we need Mrs. Herdeker in this scene, and then we need Wally Trzynski in the other scene, and then we need, this person in this scene, and we need Dawn over here and Chris Cooper over here. So like trying to, just like, I can't even imagine the logistics of, all right, this is going to be a reverse shot of this. So we got to have, I don't know if they had someone dressed up in that wig or costume or whatever to make it work, but logistically it must have been a nightmare. Just absolute nightmare trying to make this work.
In a way, you save a shit ton of money by having 5 people play every character. You don't have to hire a lot of extras and bit actors.
Yeah, but I also go back to the whole idea of you saved a bunch of money not trying to hire actors, but now you have to make a movie with only 5 people, and the amount of time that goes into trying to wrangle the logistics of shooting around that, right? So, I mean, yeah, they might save money, but imagine the amount of time that they now had to do to make this movie work with the constraints they give themselves. I did notice that there was a lot of really interesting editing tricks in this. Did you notice that?
What in particular?
Well, especially in the opening sequence of this movie. So in the opening sequence, they kind of are giving you kind of you're the camera, and it kind of moves across all of these different planes. But I noticed they did a lot of match cuts with different pieces of the sets to blend in when one character would be in one part of the scene and another. So you could have, say, for instance, Scott Thompson in 2 different roles, as long as the camera was moving from one part to another. So you got kind of a blend there. It was interesting to see. And I was like, that's pretty much the only way you'd be able to do it, to kind of make it feel cohesive and make it feel like we're not jumping from one shot to the other, where you can kind of blend it together.
Brian, do you think that there's something to be said, because we're talking about the roles like being played by all the guys? Like, do you think some people were turned off by all the women being just played by the fellas? That maybe it would have worked more if there were actual women in the movie?
In 1996, yes.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, truth be told, had issues in 2024 with that. A lot of people like to go and kind of glamorize the 90s and say like, oh, everything was great back then. Not 100% true. It just was not as obtuse. That's the word I would use. Not as obtuse as you have now. But honestly, like things like drag and things like, certain jokes, they struck a much stronger chord back then, just because I think that the society at the time was not as exposed to it. You didn't have like RuPaul's Drag Race in 96. At least I don't think you did. I think that was like a later 90s thing.
Yeah, mid-aughts, I think.
Yeah.
Something.
But like Boulay Brothers and their stuff. You didn't have it as part of our culture as you do now. Like I don't see it nearly, and I have friends who are drag performers. I don't see it nearly as shocking. I do see it as more of an art form now, but I don't see it as shocking as people in 1996 would have, because I just don't think it was part of the culture.
Well, as I've seen a documentary about the Kids in the Hall, and they mentioned, that everything they did was based on Python, and they're like, okay, if the show ends, we're going to come together every handful of years and make another movie, because that's what Monty Python did. But one of the things that Python did was all the guys played the women. So I think they went, okay, well, we're just going to homage that. And, it was the same thing on the show, is that they played not just the men in the show, but all the ladies too.
But do you think Python kind of got a pass because they're Python?
I think, well, England has always like been more open to, isn't as funny, it's a guy in a dress, where we might be a little bit more stuck up here in the States, where if Carol Burnett show, on the same time as Monty Python was out, if, you had one of the guys on that show dressed as a woman, they might go, how dare you? But we'll laugh when the Brits do it. I really am surprised that some people were turned off by the darkness or shock value of this humor, because the 90s were really that generation of, well, the more shocking it is, the funnier it is. And I really had to unteach myself that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And you're not, like, I'm not being edgy by making fun of a minority class or a particular type of people. Like, I'm not going to be told that I can't make jokes. I'm going to step over the line because it's the 90s and I'm edgy. Surge, bro. And it's like, no, like, there's an understanding of decorum and why you're making a joke and punching up. That in the era of Howard Stern and South Park, right around the corner, but just of that era, and Jerry Springer, how did a movie that had, jokes about fathers watching gay porn and cancer boys and somebody trying to shoot themselves in the head and failing and all these kind of jokes, like, how was this like out of pace with the rest of the Beavis and Butthead era of 90s? Anything goes, shock me, be offensive, be crude.
I mean, I go down to what is the medium that shocking content is coming through. Okay. So you mentioned Beavis and Butthead. Again, animated.
Mm-hmm.
Animated things, no problem. It's a double standard. I hate to say it. It is a double standard. Okay. And let's be honest here. Beavis and Butthead was shocking, yes, but it was, if you watch it now, it's kind of tame. Like it is kind of tame. And I don't think they ever went nearly as far as what you see in Brain Candy, and you mentioned, Howard Stern and Jerry Springer. I think those were more or less like, look at the clown car here. You know, it was more like the spectacle of this particular clown car, but it wasn't necessarily done in a way that was trying to show some level of cultural acceptance. And I think that's the problem with Brain Candy. And it's not really a problem. It's just that they're making these things happen as part of like everyday life. You've got, Wally Trzynski, who plays the homosexual father, but they're not making him out to be some bizarro weirdo. Right? He lives in suburbia where everybody knows that he's gay. Like everybody knows that he's gay. It's not anything surprising. It's like, oh yeah, well, we've known.
He's the world's worst closeted homosexual.
Yeah. But I think in 1996, the public wasn't ready for this humor. I really believe that. I think they were not ready. I think if this movie had even come out 10 years later, amidst the, I'm thinking of the movies that came out 10 years after the fact, like Freddy Got Fingered.
Mm-hmm.
That movie, much more shocking than this movie is, but I think it was also a thing where you had the gross out comedies where it was accepted, and I think that this would have done well amidst those films. But I just think that it came out at the wrong time. I really believe that
this movie should have come out after Family Guy.
Yeah, I mean it does fit more with the Family Guy type vibe than anything else. But I just think that people in 1996 were not ready for jokes that were a bit more close to home than they would have liked. Having the Jerry Springer Show, having Howard Stern, having Beavis and Butthead, those are separate from down the street. Everybody probably knows someone who's going through cancer or has known someone who's gone through cancer. See, it's kind of hard to joke about that. So what I'm trying to get at is just that the Kids in the Hall Brain Candy kind of touches on humor that hits too close to home for this audience in 1996.
I could see that. That's a fair play.
Yeah. By the way, I really did like this movie. I actually did like this movie. It was not a laugh out loud movie for me, but I found it funny. I found it enjoyable. I found the little vignettes funny. I found the characters that were introduced funny. Mark McKinney is hilarious in this. I think he's probably my favorite. Him and Kevin McDonald are my favorites in this. But I really, really found this funny. John, what about you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I love this one. Like, when it comes to Really That Awful, Brian and I, there's three options. Either we come into this ready to defend a movie together as a team, like we high five with our dicks, just dick punch,
dick punch.
sometimes it's a split thing where Brian might be split dick. Yeah. Brian's like, I love this movie, and I'm like, I hate it. It was like, oh, let's review it. And then sometimes we just give one that we both of us didn't like it. Should we give it another shot? This one, dear listener, I'm sure you could tell, I came in, I like this movie a lot. I don't know if I'd say I love this movie, but I like it a lot. So but I know culturally speaking, the rest of the world doesn't. So that's why I wanted to give it a thorough analysis examination here of why this film maybe didn't work, and also just to see, am I wrong? Is it really that awful? Am I just blind? Because sometimes people like movies that other people hate.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think this movie's bad either. I really do believe that one, dark comedy is one of the hardest genres of film that you can try to do. One, comedy is just difficult to begin with, but now you're going to make comedy that is so subversive and in such dark taste that 90% of your audience is going to get it, right? 90% are going to get it. But the other thing was just that I really believe that audiences in 1996 were not ready for this. I really believe that. This was a very different time when the culture was very different, and bit naive and a bit more conservative than they would like when it comes to certain jokes that are in this movie. But I don't think it's a bad film. In fact, I think it's a pretty funny film, and it made me really reappreciate the Kids in the Hall. Like, I went back and started watching clips after watching Brain Candy, because I'm like, oh man, I forgot how funny these guys are. But speaking of Brain Candy, I have some reviews. Okay.
Yeah.
And John, you have not seen these reviews, right?
Nope. Not 1 second,
reviews.
not one bit, not one tiny morsel.
Not one tiny morsel. Okay, so the first review that I've got here, let's see if this one works here, is not only has Made from Monkey Cum been on repeat in my head for 20 years, but it's also very funny.
Fair enough. I also agree. Because it does, you could be like, oh, that's just shock value. Not only cum, but from a monkey. Is when you find out there's bugs in protein drinks, and that Taco Bell's meat has only 2% actual animal in it, and wings in the frozen food aisle, they put a Z on it because they can't technically call it chicken wings. It's
those are nuggets. Those are nuggets right there.
Yeah, those are it probably is made from something that if you actually found out, you would not be thrilled.
Yeah, no, that's one of the funniest scenes in the whole movie, is just the Serbian taxi driver going, "It's made from monkey cum." That, and it throws you off completely from the film. You're just like, wow, okay. We're just going right into that. But yeah, I mean, it does get stuck in your head. It does. All right, let's go to review number 2. I've invented a pill that gives worms to ex-girlfriends. Right. What's positive about that? God, this is so much better than box office returns and concurrent critical appraisals had always led me to believe. In a similar vein to Freddy Got Fingered, Paramount just threw a bunch of money at the boys and let them do whatever the hell they wanted. It's beyond beautiful that two groups of sketch comedy troupes tricked Lorne Michaels into bankrolling theatrical Hollywood movies that repeatedly mock him throughout.
See, I don't think that Lorne gives a shit when people make fun of him. I mean, because he was a producer to some degree for the Austin Powers movies, right?
Yeah, he was.
So between Mark McKinney in this one and Mike Myers in Austin Powers, I remember, and here's a fun wrestling story, because I have to get one in. Is
you gotta get always one.
They wanted somebody to go out during the failed invasion angle, and I'm not gonna explain that because I want to get to the point of in 2001 to go out and just trash Vince McMahon to his face, known pervert Vince McMahon, and they said Paul Heyman should go out there, who used to own ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, and Paul kept telling Vince, he's like, are you really sure that you don't want to know what I'm going to say and that you're going to be okay with me saying this stuff on live television? Vince's only response was, is it going to make me money? And he's like, yeah, but I'm going to say some really terrible things about you. Is it going to make me money? And I think that Lorne Michaels might have the same ideology. It's like, Lorne, we're going to make fun of you for the entire movie. Is it going to make me money? Yeah, we hope so. Then go ahead.
Yeah, plus I think that Lorne Michaels, being the prodigy behind Saturday Night Live, gets it, and he understands it, and he's okay with it. And, I think there's something to be said about that, and, being in on the joke is also part of it. I was reading behind the scenes of this, and it sounds like he was not extremely hands-on with this movie. He was not to the extent that you would think a producer would be. He was not extremely hands-on with this movie, but he trusted them to kind of do what they wanted to do. And there's something to that, and I think another producer might not have let them do that.
Right.
Yeah, half the stuff. Yeah, but no, I think it's good.
But on what that review had to say, though, I do want to reference that they almost had to give the Kids in the Hall carte blanche to let the inmates run the asylum, because not only is humor hard to understand if you're an executive, but this is really out there humor. It's like, how can we recommend, control, or guide something that we don't understand at all? I think we just need to give them a reasonable amount of money and just hope they don't fuck us, you know? Because, for example, Team America, World Police, for those that know that movie, the first shot of the movie opens up with a puppet doing a puppet show. And it's this like really crayon drawn background, and then this really crappy puppet, and then it pulls out to a wide shot in France. You see, oh, it's a puppeteer doing his own puppet show, and you get this wide effect. The executives that saw the first cut of Team America, that opening shot, one executive stands up and screams, "They fucked us! They took our money and they fucked us!" And then only for it to pan out and go, "Oh, never mind. I'll sit back down now." You know. Because they didn't get it. They're like, wait, these South Park guys want to make a puppet movie? Okay, well, go do it, guys. Don't fuck us.
Yeah, no, but I love that. You gotta, and here's the thing, is I think movies that stand the test of time, especially comedy films, they come from trusting the comedians, you know, especially movies that are like this. I mean, can you imagine if someone told Mike Myers, hey, you know, maybe don't do a British accent for Austin Powers? That makes no sense. It's not going to play well with Americans.
Yeah, this is a James Bond parody, isn't it? What are you doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the best comedy comes from trusting it. And maybe it's also comedy that's not going to necessarily hit an audience immediately, but it will hit an audience eventually. And I really do believe that. All right. Now, our last review, I don't have 4 today. I have 3. Okay. Our last review is a special one. It's a special one because I found this on the internet, and I'm curious, John, for your points on this one.
Okay.
Are you ready? You ready?
Bring it.
Bring it.
Let's go.
Okay, audience, you ready? Here we go. Oh, it's our good friend Joel Siskel. I wonder what he could be saying.
And I recommend this picture as kind of a midnight show cult picture, which I suspect it's destined to become.
Boy, are we apart on this one.
Oh.
I did not laugh once. I thought this movie was awful.
Oh, no, Roger.
Dreadful.
No.
Terrible.
No.
Stupid. Idiotic.
No.
Unfunny.
No.
Labored. Forced.
Oh, Roger.
Painful.
Roger, this is
bad.
What happened to your sense of humor?
I got my sense of humor. That was what my sense of humor was, starving for a laugh.
Oh,
as I looked
no,
at
Roger.
this movie.
First of all, the drag stuff was funny.
So what?
What do we? So
Okay,
what? If it's
they're in
funny.
drag. Why is it funny? Why is it funny that they're in drag?
It's not funny that they're in drag.
No,
I've
no,
knocked
they're
pictures
not.
where people have been in drag when they're not funny. I'm saying, obviously,
they're in drag and they're not funny.
You didn't get the stuff about the drug and
Oh, I caught on.
What happened, Roger?
We're different universes here. We can't talk about it. Can't talk about it. It's not funny. I didn't laugh once.
We get paid to talk about it, Roger.
Okay.
Let's talk about it.
Tell me one funny moment in the movie.
There are dozens of funny moments. Every time I
choose
say
one.
Every single time I laughed throughout the picture.
Okay.
I laughed throughout the
Well,
picture.
I'm happy for you.
No. But, well, at least it's a start. It's a smile. Roger, will you look at this picture again? Maybe.
Sure I will. I'll be happy to. Sometime maybe in the 21st century. When we come back.
Tell us how you really feel, Roger. Fuck.
Yeah, what the fuck? Okay. So full disclosure, I did show the first shot of this to John because I was like, I gotta spoil this for you. But yeah, weirdest review I've ever seen from Siskel and Ebert there, where Ebert quite literally is like, I don't want to do the thing that I get paid to do.
You know, comedy is so subjective that it is hard, unlike, say, like a dramatic film. It's very easy to defend your argument if you could say, well, here's why X, Y, and Z didn't work, more than just say, I don't like it. But comedy can really fall into that. I didn't like it. It's not my taste. That Roger, like, Gene was clearly probing him to get more out of him, of like, defend your stance. And he's like, no, it's just crap. And, you know, he's the most famous at that time reviewer in the world, so he should try a little harder than it's just crap. But
yeah, I mean, I make no bones about my hatred for Roger Ebert, primarily because of his stance on horror movies, especially movies from the 80s. But I just, we spent an hour, John, a little over an hour, talking about Brain Candy and going into far more depth with this film than Roger Ebert could ever do. His response is, I don't like it. It's not funny. I didn't laugh. Now, don't get me wrong. Yeah, it's well, I don't think he even said it's offensive. It's just like, I don't find it funny. It's like, okay, I get it. Why? What is it about it? I don't like. I got the drag. I got the pill thing. It's like, but you can't point out why. And that's why, like, I give Siskel some credit here. Okay, yeah. Man's like, hey, what in it? What is it about this you don't find funny? What is it about? Like, my only guess is that maybe Roger Ebert felt kind of the same way that audiences in 1996 felt about how dark some of this humor gets in this movie. But he doesn't want to say that. You know what I mean?
Well, here's a couple things about the reception of this movie. Like, it has a Rotten Tomato score, take of that what you will, 44%, so below 50%. As it mentions here, Siskel and Ebert were split in a heated disagreement, as you just heard. And it's interesting that the idea of it becoming a late night, midnight cult film never actually occurred in the way that, like Pink Flamingos and other movies have. It was nominated for the most painfully unfunny comedy at the 1996 Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, lost to Biodome.
Oh, come on. Yeah. Biodome's awesome.
And yeah, it made just because we're in a bubble doesn't mean we can't cause some trouble.
But the dome within the dome, John.
But the movie had an $8 million budget, made $2.6 million. So yeah. And that put a nail in the coffin of any future Kids in the Hall, more than I would think any, like, the subject matter or people being upset about Cancer Boy or this or that. If the movie had made like $40 million, they would have been Kids in the Hall. Dave Foley takes a dump, whatever the hell,
Yeah.
But yeah, even the kids themselves have expressed mixed feelings over the finished product, most notably on the behind the scenes DVD of their 2000 tour. Same guys, new dresses. The troupe took a 4-year hiatus after Brain Candy's release, so the breakup was already in motion even before the filming was underway. So
yeah,
even the boys are mixed on it,
Yeah, but I think a lot of it has to do with just the audience at the time just not getting it. I really believe that. I think had Brain Candy come out 10 years later amidst all of the gross out comedy, then it would have done well. And I think we said the same sort of thing with Cable Guy when we did that review. We said that it would have done well if it had waited a couple of years. I mean, Cable Guy came out in 98. In
96.
96. Was it 96?
Same year as this one. Yep.
Yeah. So I just think audiences back then just didn't get the dark humor.
Yeah.
They didn't get it. But just John, final thoughts on Kids in the Hall Brain Candy.
I would give it a second look, especially if you did like the show. Maybe give it another watch again, or if you've never watched it ever, because maybe you just watched the show when it was on reruns on Comedy Central, because that's what was on. Then give it a look. I think that is it perfect? Fuck no. It has some problems. There are things in it that aren't really overly funny. The third act falls apart, but it's still better than most processed comedy films of its time or even today. So I would say, for the brazenness of it all and the guys bringing their best versions of the characters, because I don't have a favorite Kids in the Hall the way, like, I'd say seasons of Saturday Night Live, I'm like, oh, I really like Dana Carvey the most or something like that. I think that they just all work so perfectly together that I don't think I have a favorite Kid in the Hall. And this movie is a representation of that, because Bruce has got the best character. No, Scott does. No, Mark. No. I would give it another look. Is it really that awful? I don't think at all. I just think it was maybe ahead of its time, not marketed right. A wider audience than people that watch the show went in and went, what the fuck is this? Because they weren't ready for it. So really that awful? No, not at all.
Yeah, I kind of echo the same sentiments, although I give this kind of a little bit lower when looking at, say, other dark comedies out there. Like I love Death to Smoochy. I love Cable Guy as dark comedies. This one I like a little less. It's just, but there are some very funny moments in it and some very funny characters. I can also see where people, you maybe were fans of Kids in the Hall, might have looked at this and gone like, this isn't the same thing as the TV show, and this isn't the same thing as like what I was expecting. And I think that was a common criticism is that, people did kind of create characters that they really liked from the Kids in the Hall show, and none of those characters really showed up in this movie.
Just the cops. That was like it.
Yeah, the cops. But I think it was even
Cancer
something.
Boy.
Well, it was even something that Lorne Michaels even said. He was like, if you guys just put some of the characters from the show in the movie, it probably would have done well. And I think there's some truth to that, is that people, in 1996, they can relate to those characters from the series. And if you throw those characters from the series in a trailer, people will go to the movie. I think that was something that hurt this. But I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's really that awful. I think it is way ahead of its time for a movie like this. I've said it a couple times this episode. Had this film come out 10 years later, I think it would have done really well. And also maybe cut the Cancer Boy thing, because that obviously really ruffled some feathers.
Yeah, abide your test audiences. Maybe just Cancer Boy.
I'm not saying like, cut everything, but just cut the Cancer Boy thing. There's enough funny things in this. You don't really need that. But especially if it's like gonna ruin your entire chances of ever working with Paramount again, which this did. I would have just cut that thing. But I understand why they didn't. They wanted to hold true to themselves. But
Brian, before we wrap up, we have to mention the ending of this movie, because I think, to me, the best joke of this movie is at the very end of the movie when what is the name of Scott Thompson's elderly woman character?
It is Mrs. Herdeker.
Mrs. Herdeker, yeah. Is that they finally figure out like a solution for the pill, and they make this poor old woman just full of abject sadness. She's like, I'm sad. And they cheer like they've just cured cancer. They realize the solution is to make everybody so fucking sad and depressed. It's like the most dark ending you could possibly think of. And I'm like, for me, that's my wheelhouse in humor. And I'm like, this is so brilliant because this is so dark and upsetting. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen a number of dark comedies that have had dark humor like that, where the ending is just horrible. Like, man, I can't. What was the one that we watched with about the wedding and everybody? Shit!
Very Bad Things. Very
Bad Things. Yeah, Very Bad Things has one of the darkest fucking endings of any dark comedy that I've ever seen. But I still laugh every single time.
Brian, have you noticed that every comedy we talk about in Really That Awful is dark? I'm starting to notice a pattern.
I'm noticing a pattern too. I think they've always been that way. Well, good talk, John. Good talk. Where can they find you at on the internet?
Well, you won't find me on X. Fuck you, Elon. I like how when we were in grad school, Brian, Twitter was the coolest social media. It was like the new cool hip kid. Yeah, if you weren't on there and you weren't able to get it into that certain amount of characters, like, what are you doing? You old bastard. But now it's like, well, that psychopathic guy who inherited billions from his dad's diamond mine is ruined it. So yeah, bye Felicia. But so yeah, not there. There, I'm done on my soapbox. You find me over on Facebook, over on Instagram, and over at JDubs Video Nasties. This one, I'll probably mention this a lot because I'm just giving myself some time here for my Christmas themed episode, which is a check-in on Batman Returns. And people who maybe don't know, they say, well, John, what is there a check-in on Batman Returns? It's that the movie has been dubbed by many people as incredibly anti-Semitic. So I'm going to explore that.
I don't know if I buy that.
Well,
I don't know if I buy that one.
I give my diagnosis at the end. I'm not saying that it's true.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I've seen Batman Returns more times than I can count. And I don't know if I see that side of it. You're not the first to bring that argument up. Yeah. I don't know if I see that side of it. But I look forward to watching it. We'll check the link in the description of this episode. You can go ahead and subscribe to John's channel.
Yeah.
With that said, if you have loved this episode, do me a favor. This is really important. Go ahead and share this episode with your friends. Seriously. If you love Kids in the Hall, if you love our discussions of movies, just share the episode out, right? Send it in text. Do whatever. Or you can go to our website, cinemapsychoshow.com/follow, and you can follow the podcast on your favorite podcast app. We have all the buttons right there. Okay, you just press one and boom, you automatically can subscribe to us right then and there. And of course, if you are watching us here on YouTube, hey, thanks for doing that. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell, because all of that stuff tells the algorithm, the spooky algorithm in YouTube, that you want more of this and that people want more of this, and it pushes our episodes out further and further. Okay, helps the podcast out a ton. Outside of that, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, we have a new newsletter. Okay, just click the link in the description of this episode here and sign up. You can get that newsletter. It's a once a week. It's not going to blast you with a bunch of stuff. It's just a once a week recap of what episode's coming out. So you literally will get the episodes delivered straight to your email. Okay, you can get that. And then on top of that, as I mentioned, each week there will be a bonus video episode that is only exclusive to just the newsletter. So you got to subscribe to the newsletter. You got to sign up for it so you always get that bonus episode. We're going to be doing it like right after we're done recording here. And I still don't know what the hell John and I are talking about. John, do you have ideas?
I think I got a good one, but
okay.
Keep it close to the vest.
Keep it close to the vest, because that's going to be part of the newsletter there. So we will see you next time.
Cheers.